The envelope. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under my door like a coiled snake. I found it when I came back from my morning walk, my arthritic knees complaining about the 3 miles I'd just covered. At 72, I was supposed to be slowing down, but slowing down meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering things I'd rather forget. I picked up the envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just my name, Harold Brennan, written in careful block letters that seemed designed to hide the writer's identity. Inside was a single photograph and a note. My hands started shaking before I even read the words. Give me the house, or everyone learns the truth about what happened to Margaret. I sank onto the worn couch that had been in this living room for 30 years, the same couch where I'd read bedtime stories to my daughter Emma, where I'd held my wife Claire during her last coherent days before the Alzheimer's took her completely. The same couch where just 6 months ago I'd watched Emma marry Derek Chen, thinking I'd finally see her happy after her difficult divorce. The photograph showed the lake house. My lake house, 2 hours north, where Claire and I had spent every summer of our 40-year marriage. But it wasn't just any picture. It showed the dock, the specific section I'd replaced 5 years ago, working alone, telling everyone I was just doing routine maintenance. Only 2 people knew why I'd really replaced that dock. One of them was dead. The other was apparently my son-in-law. I met Derek 3 years ago at Emma's office holiday party. She'd been working at the architectural firm downtown, slowly rebuilding her life after her ex-husband's betrayal left her a single mother to my grandson, Tyler. Derek was new to the firm, charming, attentive, with an easy smile that made you want to trust him. Dad, he's different, Emma had told me over coffee that winter. He actually listens. He cares about Tyler. He doesn't make me feel like I'm too much. I'd wanted to be happy for her. God knows she deserved happiness, but something about Derek had always felt rehearsed, like he was playing a role he'd studied for. The way he laughed just a beat too late at jokes. The way his eyes would go flat when he thought no one was looking. You don't like him, Emma had accused me 6 months before the wedding. I didn't say that. You don't have to, I can tell. She'd set down her mug with more force than necessary. Just once, can't you trust my judgment? Can't you just be happy for me? So I'd swallowed my concerns. I'd walked her down the aisle. I'd given a toast at the reception about new beginnings and the blessing of family. I'd written them a generous check and welcomed Derek into our small, broken circle. And now he was threatening to destroy what little I had left. The phone rang that evening. Derek's name appeared on the screen. Hello, Harold. His voice was pleasant, conversational, as if he were calling to discuss weekend plans. I assume you got my message. What do you want? My voice came out steadier than I felt. I told you what I want. The house. The deed transferred to me cleanly as a gift. You're getting old anyway. You told Emma yourself you can barely manage the upkeep anymore. That house is Emma's inheritance, Tyler's future. Emma will inherit plenty when you're gone. I'm just asking for one property. He paused. Unless you'd prefer I tell her about Margaret. My sister's name hit like a physical blow. Margaret, who died 5 years ago in what everyone believed was a terrible accident at the lake house. Margaret, who'd slipped on the dock during a storm and drowned. Margaret, who'd been drinking, who'd always been reckless, who'd left behind nothing but debts and a reputation for poor choices. I don't know what you think you know. I know everything, Harold. Derek's voice lost its pleasant veneer. I know about the argument. I know she came to the lake house that night threatening to tell everyone that you'd stolen from her trust fund. I know you were the last person to see her alive. And I know that Doc was in perfect condition before that night. Funny how it suddenly needed replacing right after she died. It wasn't. I couldn't form the words. Because while his version was wrong, the truth was somehow worse. The police ruled it an accident. But what would happen if Emma knew her beloved father might have killed his own sister? What would happen to your relationship with your daughter, your grandson? He let the silence stretch. I'm not greedy, Harold, just the lake house. Sign it over and your secret stays buried. You can tell Emma you're downsizing, simplifying your estate. She'll understand. And if I refuse? Then I show Emma the evidence I've collected, the financial records showing you had access to Margaret's trust, the witness who heard you two arguing that afternoon, the photos of the damaged dock before you replaced it, the timeline that doesn't quite add up. His voice turned almost sympathetic. She'll never look at you the same way again, neither will Tyler. Is that really worth holding onto a house? I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table, the photograph in front of me, and let myself remember. Margaret had come to the lake house that August evening 5 years ago, drunk and furious. She had gotten it into her head that I'd stolen from the trust fund our parents had left her, the one I'd managed for her after she'd proven herself incapable of handling money. She'd been screaming that I'd stolen her inheritance, that I'd kept her poor while enriching myself. It wasn't true. I'd used the money to pay her debts, to cover her rehab stints, to bail her out of the consequences of her own choices again and again. The trust was nearly depleted, not because I'd stolen from it, but because I'd spent years trying to save her from herself. But that night she wouldn't listen. She'd stumbled onto the dock, still screaming accusations, and when I'd tried to calm her down, she'd swung at me. I'd grabbed her arm to stop her, and she'd jerked backward, lost her balance, hit her head on the railing. She'd fallen into the water, unconscious. And I'd frozen. For what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, I'd stood there watching her sink, watching the water close over her head. By the time I'd jumped in after her, by the time I'd pulled her to shore and called 911, it was too late. The police had ruled it an accidental drowning. Alcohol in her system, a history of reckless behavior, a tragic accident. I'd let them believe it because the truth, that I'd hesitated, that I'd stood there watching, seemed impossibly worse than their clean narrative. The dock railing had been broken in the struggle. I'd replaced it before anyone could ask too many questions. I'd never told anyone about those seconds of hesitation. I'd carried that guilt alone, let it eat at me in the quiet hours, used it as my private penance. And somehow, Derek knew. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my old friend Robert Marsh, who'd retired from practicing law but still kept his hand in. We'd known each other since college, had been groomsmen at each other's weddings, had watched our children grow up together. "Bob, I need advice, off the record." 2 hours later, we sat in his study while I told him everything. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Harold, what Derek is doing is called extortion. It's a crime. But what he's threatening is a misrepresentation of what happened. You didn't kill Margaret. You had an accident, you tried to save her, and you've been torturing yourself ever since." Bob leaned forward. "The question is, what do you value more, a house or your relationship with your daughter? I don't want to lose Emma." "Then tell her the truth, not Derek's version, the real truth, before he can poison it." Bob's expression was grave. "I know it's terrifying, but I've known Emma her whole life. She's fair, she's compassionate, and she deserves to hear this from you, not from a man who's manipulating both of you." That evening, I asked Emma to come over. When she arrived, looking worried at my unusual summons, I made tea the way she liked it and sat her down in the living room where I'd read her bedtime stories decades ago. "Sweetheart, I need to tell you something about the night your Aunt Margaret died." And I told her everything. The argument, the struggle, the terrible moment of hesitation, the guilt I'd carried. I told her about Derek's demands, about the photograph, about the threat. Emma's face went through a dozen emotions: shock, grief, anger, confusion. And finally, she cried. "Dad, why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was ashamed, because I stood there and let my own sister drown." "You didn't let her drown, you froze. Anyone might have frozen." She gripped my hands. "And Derek," her voice turned hard, "Derek has been in our attic, going through our family papers. He told me he was organizing things for me." She looked sick. "He's been planning this." The next day, Emma confronted Derek. I don't know everything that was said, but I know she moved out that afternoon, taking Tyler with her. I know she filed for an annulment. And I know that when Derek tried to contact her with threats, she forwarded everything to the police. The house, both houses, remain in my name. I'm considering leaving the lake house to Tyler when he's older, letting him make new memories there that aren't haunted by mine. Emma and I are closer now than we've been in years. The truth, painful as it was, freed something between us. She understands now why I'd seemed distant sometimes, why I'd avoided talking about Margaret. "You're not a murderer, Dad," she told me last week. "You're just human, and I love you." Sometimes the blackmailer loses. Sometimes the truth, terrifying as it is, turns out to be the only real protection you have.